Well, hello and welcome to Work Cookie, our weekly gathering of IOs, OCs, recruiters, and an actor or two as we try to make the world of work just a little bit better. And today, Jeremy, happy IO Psychology Awareness Month to you. And I think today we're going to continue our open mic discussion, but you're going to pose the discussion topic of why delegating is important and how to overcome your lack of it.
Delegation by far with coaching clients, it's one of the things that comes up that the absolute most that people say, look, I want to focus on this. Let's put it on the IDP on our roadmap. So I found a really good article from Harvard Business Review, and we're going to start off with a little bit of the history because I was like, all right, I was thinking, what are some of the interesting historical examples? How far back can we go? And I also have a resource that we can share there in the chat now and also in the show notes. So, delegation, and I'm looking at all these different things. So, in the beginning, God made animals, but he delegated man to do the job of naming them. There's something called the Jethro principle. It's taught in a lot of like business and leadership curricula. Um, it's where so I'll read a little bit kind of verbatim. Moses, the leader of several hundreds of thousands of Israelites, he was serving as judge. And from morning till evening, he had to be the judge, and he's spending all this time doing that. So his father-in-law, Jethro, gave him some advice, said, select the capable men from all the people and appoint them as officials over all these people. It will make your load lighter, and they'll share it with you. Also, ancient Greeks invented, I didn't look into what this is because I ran out of time, invented the hydraulic telegraph and other messaging tools. I think of it, I guess, as like, smoke signals with fire, which relied on delegated operators for signal transmission, which demonstrated both the importance of initiative and big thing in delegation, which is trust. Warren Buffett. So I looked at Berkshire Hathaway's. Their market cap is now 1 trillion. It's the world's 11th most valuable company. Delegates decision making to the management companies that Berkshire invest in, which again, trusting their experience instead of micromanaging. So that's a really, really like that's a much larger example. So delegation can go wrong. There were some historical takeaways of that, but they were just there was a lot, but they're more it was less micro like we think of in our world, and they were like, okay, this was delegated and this blew up a country kind of a thing. So there are ways that delegation can go wrong. So then it's like, okay, when we're delegating, how do we do it effectively? And we'll cover a little bit of that too. I put I'm going to do a screen share. So there is oh, good. I can see some of you already popped on. This is I'm going to think of where to start. So this is a resource this is like the Frankenstein of delegation stuff put together from different people that I've coached. I also added today a takeaway, I think, from this HBR Harvard Business Review article. And so there's an actual Google Doc. All of these are open, so anyone with the links can access them, can view them. You can copy and paste any of this into your own spreadsheet or make a copy of it if you want to edit for personal use. In general, as you can see, I'm just going to walk through this quickly. As you can see here, we've got some different narratives about shifting your mindset. And for those who are listening to the actual podcast, I'll name a couple of these here. Shifting from control to empowerment, focusing on outcomes and not methods. Understand that your way isn't the only way to get things done. This whole concept, this I think it's like a Stephen Covey concept of if you want to other people to do work, you can't necessarily supervise their methods. And of course, it depends on the level of the person and how much love we need to give them and how much attention based on what it is. This, so it's broken up into tabs. This is a checklist of the previous plus some others where you can go through and here's a mindset prompt. Like real work is not just activity based. It's not just dopamine hits. It's not just these dopamine hits that we get from checking off a list, which we'll explore makes it hard to delegate. Rather, go into like what's your leadership brand and how do you want to be perceived? Think about what other things you can get more value-based dopamine hits in terms of strategy and leadership. And we'll get into something a little bit here called context setting, which is important. But in this particular spreadsheet, I'm trying to walk that line, Tom, between talking to the people that are listening to the recorded podcast versus here with the live audience. And then this tab is a link to this particular document, which are some of the main takeaways. We'll get into that in a second. These this is really important. So there's this tab that says empowering questions for hands-on training of delegated tasks. When we're delegating, one of the biggest things is I can do it quicker. I'll just go ahead and get it done. As a rule of thumb, my rule of thumb is if it takes less than 2 minutes, do it yourself. Everything else, it's focus on what you can delegate. How often when we are training people or delegating tasks and showing people how to do it, it normally you're showing someone how to do something and it's, do you have any questions? No. Is this clear? Yes. And it's just this very transactional where when that happens, people fail to take accountability. They fail to see how they might do things a certain way. There's this concept called three. I think this, I also heard this from Covey many years, like a decade ago. It's called three-person teaching. When we're learning something, or let me put it the other way, when we're teaching something, encourage others. Don't don't consume this information so that you learn it and know it or know how to do it. Consume it in a way that pretend you have to teach someone else how to do it. It'll encode things differently in your brain so that you're starting to use examples, past experiences, analogies, because to really understand someone, you can be able to show someone else. If you're an expert at parachuting, you're an expert enough to teach others how to parachute. It's not just sitting here and just digesting and learning information. So some of these sample questions for those listening are, you can, and they're broken into categories like, draw on prior experience. Have you done something similar before? How did you approach it? What strengths could that you have or past experience could help you? To clarify understandings instead of, is it clear? Yes. Do you have any questions? No. It's, can you walk me through what you understand so far? What are the clearest things? Tell me three things that feel foggy to you. And I like the use of numbers because it keeps people from saying, nothing. You're asking for specific numbers. What's your first instinct on how to approach this? What's your second, more thought out way on how to approach this? So this is good. They're broken into 6 different particular categories of questions that you can ask actively while you're working and training someone. And also, Tom, we talk about how whatever some things that work in business life work in personal life and vice versa. If you have kids, this is a really good way. There was a let's see if I can find it. There's a quote of which I want to get to. So educator Howard Hendricks once noted, anytime you do for someone else what they're capable of doing for themselves, you're helping to create an emotional cripple. So that just leads us more to, okay, it's important to delegate, give up other people the opportunity to grow, and so on. This tab right here is a sample skills matrix because this comes up. You want people that are capable of doing the task, and you also want to gauge their interest level. Tom, can you see this matrix here? Okay.
Yep.
So right here is just the sample, and it's to get an idea of like this particular category, for example, data analysis skill level. What do an interest level? What do you do if someone is a 1 for skill level, but a 5 for interest level? In other words, they really want to do it, but they absolutely stink at it. What do you do? Well, first, it's good to know that. And then what do you do if somebody's really good at something but has no interest in it? So there's, again, these are all conversation pieces that everyone feel free once we get chugging here to chime in on. I'm sharing this. This is an example. One person I coach really took this to heart and created this, which is absolutely amazing. This is so what I'm showing here, it's a on steroids spreadsheet of a very simple skills matrix. This is self-reported. Hey, I'm good at it. Like a scale 1 to 5. This is my skill level. Scale of 1 to 5. This is my interest level. And this is self-report. And this particular person broke it down into the top priorities, anything below a 3, and then created some graphical things here with dates to be able to see how over time their skill interest level may change. So providing an example there. This tab is a similar form, but it's just where the axis is reversed. So this is available. It's an open link for anyone to use. And this here. So I'm going to share some of the background. So I had this PDF of this article, and of course now with Adobe, you can hit, give me an AI summary, which is helpful, right? So I did that, I hit it. And that's what is provided here with the main takeaways. And I read through them because anytime we use AI, we want to double check, put the human eye on it. So I looked through and I thought there's a lot of things that I think are important that are getting missed, and what the AI thought was important. So this uh, other section here highlighted delegating effectively. So this is what happened, Tom. So I went through. I probably spent like an hour and a half, and I'm typing up everything, all my takeaways from the article, and what I thought was important. And then I thought, I wonder if this is a little hard to digest. So what I do, I ended up copying and pasting that to ChatGPT. I said, hey, clean this up for me, make it more readable, yada, yada, yada. So this is what it popped out. And then, of course, I had like a side by side original versus this version to make sure anything wasn't lost. And then I edited it a little bit. It's just amazing contextually, like how we use AI. And even when we do it ourselves, and I couldn't argue with it. I was like, okay, this is more digestible. It's easy to track. It's more easy to follow. So I'll just stop screen share. But what I'm going to do now is I want to go through a couple of the main takeaways that I'm glad I found the article, because in creating that sheet as a resource, there's some of the things that I hadn't thought about. And when we look at, and it is true, we look at people say, I want to do this. I feel good after doing it. And that's what this article, that's what they call activity. I should say, oh, never mind. I was going to make sure it's all in the notes. I was going to take the time to remember the article title, but it's in the notes. Activity-based tasks are more of your closing a deal, administrative tasks, getting those things done. Makes you feel productive, but you stay really stuck in the weeds. So the suggestion is really to just rewire where we get our satisfaction from.
Mm.
And part of it is looking at, so you have activity-based work, and then you have setting context, so contextual-based work. It's noted that when you do cognitive context setting, it's taxing on our brains. We lose our dopamine hit. It's the anti-dopamine hit. So what can you do? You can mimic the kinds of things that do give you these chemical hits. Some suggestions, create different checklists for internal meetings, for example, maybe when you are delegating. Create some checklists so that you can check things off, get those same, explain why you're having the meeting, make list of tasks to delegate and check those off, describe very specific behaviors, and outline achievement, desired achievement and goals. Also, you can make delegation like good practices, best practices. You can make those more routines. You can like when you're having a particular meeting, because our brain, again, these dopamine hits, especially even when we're organizing. If you're cleaning your house, you're getting dopamine hits. If you're organizing something, putting things into boxes, for example, or organizing files, we actually get dopamine hits. So you can have things organized in a way that's helpful, where you might have one-on-one meetings and maybe have a little bit of a template as guiding questions. Not that you have to stay into that structure, but maybe like, what's your biggest challenge right now? What steps are you taking to overcome it? What's a barrier that I can remove that's holding you down? And overall, it's think about long-term value. So reframe your purpose as a doer, as a individual contributor, and start to think of what's my leadership brand now? What would other people perceive it as? What do other people perceive it as? What do I want it to be? And how can I get there? Because when you're helping companies, when you're helping your team be more effective, you be more effective, you lose the activity based hits. But when you see employees grow, you have great examples, you might have some kudos moments, you can get more value based dopamine hits that are, bigger and more impactful. For example, I see some hands up, so I'll save some of this for a later time.
All right, before we go to LindaAnn, let me ask you this because I think delegation is critical. And the more I've embraced leadership, the more delegation becomes a key component of that. So, for example, if I'm directing a major musical, I could be, a director could be a dictator, and I could, control and have heavy hands in my choreographer, my music director, my set designer. But I found it much more effective when I give them power because they're really, really good at what they do. But I've had that type of conversation, in different corporate settings, and I've explained to people, maybe they're a direct manager of mine, that things would be better if there was a bit more delegation, and it would free up their time. We would be more effective, more productive. And the response I get is, yeah, but I'm a micromanager, and that way, I get to make any decision I want. So when you have someone who is in love with the power of micromanaging, they're not thinking about delegation at all. And even though it could make their life easier and more effective, they just like the power. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I winced at a point when you were saying that, because you said even though it would make their life easier. And that's one thing that I was going to mention, but you already mentioned it, is frame it into how it will make their life easier. Part of it is visioning and creating. Oh man, I mean, you've opened up a huge little huge can of worms here. Oh my gosh. Let me think on that, because I have about five different things and I'd probably talk for the rest of the time. Let me think on that. And in the meantime, maybe Linda Ann or Rich, but I want to be a little more concise.
All right, LindaAnn, let's go to you.
Well, first, I want to go back to Jeremy's doing your housework creates dopamine. I don't know. I'm not doing it right if I'm
Me neither.
but I think it is a mindset. And here's, I often what I've observed is that people don't delegate because they see it as this huge burden and task to delegate to someone that's overwhelming. Like now I have to train them and all this kind of stuff. If you look at it, I like it. I like to think of it as the Miyagi method, from Mr. Miyagi, wax on, wax off, where you're constantly exposing them to little pieces. So, like Jeremy mentioned something about parachuting, and I'm thinking, okay, well, if you've had somebody help you pack your parachute and make the appointment to go to your jump, and you take them through the process, that when you finally say, here, you can do it, they've done most of it, all the little lead up pieces, just like when you teach your child to cook. The first part is, they're sitting at the table or the counter while you're chopping the onions, and they're watching and you're talking. And then eventually you go, okay, they get to the point where, Mom, can I help you cook? Well, yeah, sure. Here, go chop these onions, because you've seen it 100 times. It's that little incremental process that you break it down. And I think that that finally, when they get to the point where they're actually doing it, yes, you have to accept the fact that they don't do it exactly as you want it. That's part of it, you know. Um, and but it's all okay, and they get there, right? So it's just these. It's one of the things I say to clients often is whenever they're doing something, who are you taking with you? Just having them in the room, just having them exposed to whatever it is helps that next level, right? So I think that that's really important. I love that Jeremy gave us this skills matrix. I just went through developing a whole skills matrix for my one client, or I took them through the process, right? And it was a process, but that's really important in an organization for a couple of reasons. When you have that skills matrix, first, it helps the hiring process, right? You can help any candidates do a self-evaluation on that skills matrix, and you can see where they are and does that really match what you need them to be. Second, once you decide to hire them, now you have that baseline, and you can help do it helps your training program. Where do we need to work with people as they come in, and how do we meet them where they are? Because we know where they are, right? Then that helps the career development process, and it helps the performance management process. So I think that skills matrices are a wonderful thing that seldom does a company take the time to do. And we did it over a couple of months, you know, weekly meetings, and went through all the work process and everything. So I think that's really valuable. And as you do this, then it does become part of your routine, as Jeremy mentioned, and it helps you break things down a little bit more. Yeah, that's where I am.
Well, thank you very much for that. Rich, let's go to you.
I have a confession to make that I am a dopamine junkie. I'm sorry that I have to say this. Look at this. See that notebook? That's my cleaning schedule on Saturday. And I love my cleaning schedule on Saturday. I also love my Asana, or working with any of those Trello or Basecamp or any of those things, right? You hit a checkbox, and I'm a happy camper. So, but I will say that there's regarding delegation, there's a whole industry, coaching industry, right, that's built on helping leaders to delegate, because you can't have, it's been said, you can't have a business if you're the one working in the business and not working on the business, right? So you need to delegate. You need to have people doing what they're supposed to do. As Jim Collins says, right? Get the right people on the bus, put them in the right seats, and keep them there, right? So I used to own a sign company years ago. I had help with a franchise called the Growth Coach, but there are other coaching programs, franchises that are out there, Action Coach and several other ones. Vistage is another very common organization that leaders belong to, and there's even the entrepreneurial operating system. That's Mark Winters and Gino Wickman from Traction and Rocket Fuel. All of these have systems that are built into them to have the owners take the time out to figure out and assess who's in the organization, what needs to be done, from what Jeremy said, right? Start at the vision, you're working to your vision and values, you're working on the organizational goals, so like EOS calls them rocks, other places call them different things, but there are these SMART goals, and then developing the strategies. But it's that tactical level, right, where you are delegating people to the boxes that need of the work packages that need to be done, right? So there's a whole industry built around this, because nobody wants to do it and nobody typically knows how to do it themselves, right? But when you have a peer group, or even an external consultant, or you're just somebody who has a fresh perspective and is not in the weeds with you, it can be a powerful thing. So that's why you'll have like a coaching program like Growth Coach or Vistage, where the chairperson, the coach themselves, are not giving you the answers. You are to develop the answers yourself, and to have the peers within the group mastermind with you, right? So it's a very common thing to see, because it's not easy. Delegation is a hard thing.
Well, let me ask you this, because this is actually something I've been thinking about over the last couple of months. But, when I think of occupational consultants or IO psychology consultants, I think of them as, I have an established business. Maybe I want to make it more profitable, more effective, or maybe I'm having issues. I'm going to bring one of you guys in. But in the last couple of months, as I've been fantasizing about the new business I want to build, there's a handful of people I want to recruit, but I've been going, I think the very first person I'm going to actually hire would be an occupational or IO psychology consultant. Do you believe that as well? Like, if you're an entrepreneur and you're creating something, that don't wait until you've actually established the team, actually help them get someone on board from day one as you start to move forward.
Oh my gosh. All right, everybody. I'm going to hear the eye roll throughout the entire country. It depends. Seriously, you asked that question, but really, I mean, it depends on where the organization is in their process, right? I mean, a startup's going to be different than a business that's multi-generational, has been around for 2 or 3 years, right? So bringing in somebody like that at some point, yes, makes a lot of sense. Somebody who understands organizational behavior and how people work with each other. Yeah, I mean, that part makes a lot of sense. When to bring them in is a matter of, where are we in the process? Where do we have to figure out what our org design looks like, and all of that. So I don't know if that answers your question, Tom, but that's the most cop-out answer. The most cop-out answer possible on this podcast.
Well, it's okay. There's lots of people here, so someone, I'm sure, will punt the ball a little further down the line. Maybe it'll be Nick. Let's go to you.
Yeah. I mean, if you wanted to, build the right foundation, bringing in somebody to consult on some of those problems that you think you're going to have, but you don't know that you're going to have them until they show up, which is a lot of times delegation's a great idea, but you don't realize it until you're too far down the line. You've got too many balls in the air, you're juggling. You didn't realize you needed to hand it off to somebody until you were burned out. And so, to LindaAnn's point, bring people with you. It's part of that succession planning. It's part of that idea of keep looking to the future. And so if you identify the people who can handle those tasks, then you have kind of a ready-made stable to say, okay, I can trust Tom with a little more here. I can trust Jeremy with a little more there. But also, it's, you get very creative, smart people who are entrepreneurs, and they don't even think about that problem until it's staring them in the face. And so preemptively, yes, it would be a great idea if everybody stopped, took a breath, and came up with a long-term strategy of how they're going to deal with every possibility under the sun. But the reality is, I've got a great idea. I'm going to hit the ground running, and we'll deal with the problems as they come up. So I think that it does have to be part of the culture, be ingrained in, okay, I can't do it all. And as a business owner, you don't want to do it all. You talk about taking these incremental growth steps, and you have to get something off your plate to focus on what is going to be that next level of growth. And it's scary. I mean, even a minor example, I've stepped back to waiting tables instead of managing, and I was a little overloaded, and I looked at somebody, it's like, can you go double check, a drink order? And I delegated the task. It was the right thing to do. It kept things moving along. But, I had to step and say, well, somebody else is going to get the credit, or I'm going to look, maybe a little overwhelmed. But the guest still got taken care of, and that was the central goal of it. And so to be able to, know my next 3 steps and know what needs to be done so that I'm in a position to say, okay, you go there, They say with CPR, don't say somebody call 911. You look at somebody, you point and say, you call 911. And so then you have a clear sort of communication there. And it's not easy. And you're not quite sure exactly what's going to happen. And once you relinquish control or responsibility, then you have to, add exponentially more variables of how is this person going to do it? What if they don't do it my way? What if they do it better? And so there's ego checks and all of that as well.
Yeah, and you sort of hit on something about, the communication aspect as well, because, I've had people in my career who tried to delegate through emails, and it's taken 3 or 4 emails until I actually understand what they're asking. So how important are those communication skills with something like delegation, and where you're standing, do people really communicate well?
We like to think we do. It's one of those things you can probably furnish 100 libraries easily with, ideas about communication. And I think there are times where we think we're being subtle and we're trying to hint at it. We don't want the high performer to know that they're a high performer. And so that's going to change their behavior. But at the same point, you have to say, I want you to take on this task because I am seeing something in the future for you. And so it does require kind of that long view and that vision, and that can get very easily lost when the bills are due or the client's calling or anything like that. And so it does take a measure of patience and, purpose and vision to say, okay, this is what the business does. This is how we're going to do it. And these are the people we have in place to take care of that. And so you can think you're being clear, but you might be on a podcast ranting for 5 minutes and people look at you cross-eyed. But, if you can get your point across, in fewer words, the better. But you're not always sure, is there background noise or whatever, is the message being received, and is the message clear in the first place?
Exactly. And you can't be a good communicator unless you're a really good listener. And that's where a lot of people struggle. Thank you very much for that. Jason, let's go over to you.
Yeah, I got to find my buttons. Appreciate it. I love delegation. Delegation's a lot of fun. It makes you look lazy, I guess, or, there's this whole thing of like trust that goes along with delegation. It's really interesting, especially in my line of work. We don't have authority over people, right? If you don't have authority over people, it's hard. Well, you have this perception that you can't delegate. I can't tell them what to do. They have different bosses than me. And I think as consultants and everything, you guys have I'm still learning on this part, but I think that you guys have a really great opportunity to teach these, they're leaders that don't have direct reports, but still carry a responsibility to get things done within the workplace. But they do have to delegate, but the delegation is through like a communication of influence or something like that. But I'm not sure if this is something that you guys have experienced before or how to approach it. It's something that's kind of lost me over the last couple of years for sure.
That's a great point, Jason. And, the role of influence in almost anything, especially leadership. And yeah, I can see, especially in delegation, that if you can't influence people, you can't delegate them. So Jeremy, we're going to come back to you on that one. But Cam, good to see you. Let's go to you.
Yeah, I tried to not say this because I don't want to take our conversation off from where it's headed, but I have to say it. I'm compelled because of what we know as IO psychologists about growth mindset. And as I'm looking at the skills matrix, I wondered, I'd like to hear from Jeremy a little bit about 2 things. First of all, how do you keep that being a living document? If someone has a level 4 interest in data analysis and they're level 1 at skill, but if they're really interested, they're going to skill up in that over the next 18 months, 2 years or so. And another is, have you ever thought about incorporating peer ratings into the skill level? I was with an organization for a long time that people would try to worm their way into places, and I could see self-reports being used to do that. So I'd be interested on any advice on, because this is an amazing document. this is a really helpful format.
Well, thank you very much for that. And Jeremy, way to go. Jeremy, you want to come back now, or do you want us to go to LindaAnn first?
I'll just what Cam was just mentioning. As far as peer ratings, yeah, that's definitely not a bad idea. There could easily be a separate column for that. I mean, however, the thing that I was amazed at was how it was just this very simple matrix, and the person that created this complex one did what they did. So yeah, peer ratings can easily be included in that because you're right. It does come time and time again where people are submitting work and there are so many different errors. I mean, I've had people, they'll pop it back to them and they'll do like a Loom, like a screen share video and say, "Hey, here's some things in the document," and they'll reiterate like these are the different things that you missed, but make it as a training document. There are other people that will bounce it back and say, I found 11 different, I found 11 different mistakes basically. Can you find them? So people do have an inflated whatchamacallit of their own value and what they present. There was a study, I know you guys have heard of this, where they had people create origami figures like decades ago, and then they placed a value on them. So first what they did is they said, all right, here's an origami giraffe, here's an origami whale. How much would you pay for it? When they actually made, and then they would have them make origami and then say, how much is it worth? How much would you pay for it? The price was greatly inflated because they made it. So when we have our hands in making that pizza, I'm reiterating Cam's point of, yeah, it can be important to have those peer ratings. How do you keep it a living doc? In the in that so in those screenshots that I shared, the second one that has all those graphs, there I had to cut, so there was actually a whole top of that. I had to cut it off just for confidentiality, but there was a whole top of that where it's tracked by date. So you can make it a living document just simply by adding some columns, tracking everything by date, for example. A good and I love the whole scale of 1 to 5, scale of 1 to 10. Doing a temperature check like that. I mean, not just delegation. Think, just anything, any type of skill level, any type of knowledge area, objective, something that somebody's working on, being able to get even a self-report, like if you're coaching, for example, month 1, month 2, month 3, month 4. Yes, I mean, we still run into that problem of it's subjective, but when you do it in a coaching situation, you also have your coach there to push back a little bit. But I go on a tangent. So I think the two main things, Cam, that you said were how to keep it a living document and how do you incorporate peer ratings. So that's what I have in response to that. The other thing I'll mention, I don't know if I mentioned before, uh, this particular leader their own. They started out with not the self-report, like sitting with those people and saying, "How would you rate yourself here?" So she has that other data where she just sat and said, "From my standpoint, here's the rating." So I would encourage that to be tracked as well. Yeah.
Let me go back to sort of what Jason was saying and talk about the role of influence. Because if I want to delegate, if I have really good positive influence or great relationship, it's a lot easier. I mean, I could be the type of delegator who just directs people. You're going to do this, you're going to do this. But I find out that, if I've got that great influence, and I'm open to delegation, they'll actually come to me and suggest, they'll put themselves up for assignments and stuff. So, how can you use influence to do delegation positively?
You It's surprising how, like you said, people are running to you. Hey, what else can I do for you, et cetera, based on that influence. Part of it is very simple. These things that we fail to execute because we're just we're social beings, but we're not the best communicators. I think Nick, you said something to that effect earlier. Simply, feedback's important. People like feedback, and people even like constructive feedback because people like to get better. Prefacing with "you're really good at," if you want someone to do X, then it's, "Hey, I noticed you're really good at this. Would it be a terrible idea for you to take this on?" It works wildly wonderful with kids. Hey, you're a fast runner. Can you go get this? Because I don't feel like walking over there. But you don't say that last part. You're a really good runner. I notice you have your lightning shoes on. Could you? Oh, they're like, oh yeah, and they'll sprint as fast as they can. But mimic that in the workplace too, where you can build people up. You notice what their skills are. Think about their interests. That's very appropriate and good to do too. Think about what they're interested in. Think about what they're interested in. I lost my train of thought. What they're passionate about. And oh my gosh, Tom, that thought is gone. It is out the door. I see like bird wings and it's flying away from me right now. But there's also different I'm so removed from these classes now. I can't remember the different types of power. Like there's I think referent power. There's like given power. I'm the boss, so I get to do this. I think it's referent power. You guys can correct me.
Expert
Where
power, referent power.
people want to do things for you because they respect you and they like you and they have an attachment to you, right? So once you have that, but just increasing the soft skills, read influence or what was that Dale Carnegie book, influencing how to win friends and influence people. That's always a good book. Bottom line, people want to feel good about themselves. So if you can make people feel good about themselves, you can really make them an advocate for you. And when you're talking about delegation, if you can make people feel good about themselves, they'll want to take on different things. It's also about really growing and growing each other and growing a team. I had there's this person I was coaching, and his boss was going his boss's boss was going to leave, was going to retire. So his boss was going to take this position. And this person, real go-getter, excellent individual, said, I've been thinking about this. I think it's called the Pareto principle, this 80-20 rule, where like 20% of your work produces the majority of the results. So he said, what can I do? Basically, the plan ended up being, and then the three of us met, me, him, and his boss, about, okay, to his boss, what's on your 80% list that is just taking away from you being most effective? I can help with some of those and put those into my bucket of my 20% to get them to work really hard on it. And then he even thought farther out. Plus, my team, I can give them part of my 80%. And it all started actually, let me talk at the top of the cascade, where it was he was managing up and telling his boss how he can have this conversation with the one who's retiring and saying, right now, because you got, 6 months to a year, what's your 80%? So it's this nice cascading effect where people get to make their 20% part of what really matters and just make everything more effective as a whole. But back to this original point, what made this employee be so hungry to go and do this and help his boss? Yes, of course, looking for opportunity, but I can tell you that that wasn't the most of it. The most of it is he really appreciated this leader, loved this guy's leadership style, and just had that attachment. He wanted to do good for him because this leader had created an advocate because he recognized this person's skills and told him that. And again, just go back to make people feel good about themselves. If there's someone that you don't appreciate, because you can have people that you work with that you actually, I can't find anything I appreciate about them. They always drive me nuts. They are always pushing my buttons. They blah. Look harder. Find one thing because they have a family, they have friends, they have qualities that some people like about them. You just have to find those out. Everyone has really great qualities. And as a leader, it's our job to sometimes look, even if it's with a microscope, into the nooks and crannies to find out how can I build a relationship, build this person up, what nooks and crannies, what can be made done. So, Tom.
That's hard though sometimes, Jeremy.
Oh, Tom, are you kidding me? It's super easy.
LindaAnn, let's go to you.
Yes, indeed. It's always let's see. That's a growth and development process for us. I wanted to come back to some things that Cam was talking about as far as the skills matrix and peer ratings and things. And one of the ways that we use it is that it's specific to each job position in the organization, right? So and we have what the expected level of performance is for that particular role. And then we go through where they are in their position now, right? And so they see this very clear understanding and path of how to move forward. One of the challenges that we often face when we're delegating to somebody or to develop them is they don't really see what they need to do next. It's kind of like this dark forest that people that as employees often walk through. They don't really know what it takes to be successful. They don't know what they need to do as far as a skill development thing to see where that path is and how to be successful going forward, or even to ask, can you teach me? And for them to advocate, where do they need to be delegated to? Right? If they know that, oh, I need this next skill in order for me to move forward in my career, then they can say, hey, I can do that for you. I need to get experience doing that.
Because I agree with you 100%, but quite often those people in positions of leadership are not really good at that, not really good at training or thinking about the people working under them, how they can progress. So is there a role for the HR department in all of this with looking at the employees in the organization and how they can continue to grow?
Yeah, that's our job.
Isn't it? How come you're not doing it? I mean, does HR really have that power in most organizations to go, we're going to take that employee, we're going to upskill them for this reason? Because I don't see a lot of that.
Here's the thing. Sometimes you have to do things in a way that people really don't realize that's what's happening.
Oh, be tricky.
Influence and say, okay, and give them opportunity. There's ways you do it that it's not like a smack them in the head.
So there you hear it, Jason. That's the advice from LindaAnn. Just trick people. And I like that. I'm going to go with that. Nick, let's go to you.
Yeah, somebody brought up parenting, and there's always value in that. You don't necessarily delegate for your own benefit, but if you're kind of in that service leadership sort of idea, you're delegating for their benefit. You're providing the skills so that they'll have the next step. And just like teaching a kid to cook, something's going to get broke. It's going to take longer the first few times. And I don't think we're wired to say, okay, I'm front loading, an extra 3 hours a week trying to teach this person. But once they're up to speed, I'm going to save 6 and I'm not going to have to worry about it anymore. And so there's that long-term, short-term sort of lens that you have to take it through. And I think there's something I think you're kind of getting at is it HR's function to, develop people? Yeah, there's a development component in that department, but I think you do have to have somebody who's dedicated to that idea of, this is how we're going to grow people. And to your point about bringing somebody on early in the process, well, yeah, it's one of those, do you want to make it a cultural touchstone? Do you want it to be there? Then you have to delegate that task to somebody who's good at it. Because there's a book I listened to recently, Who Not How, kind of says, I'm not a good author, so I found this guy who writes, and it was a collaboration, and it was fantastic. So putting the right tasks in the hands of the right people, it's, again, you don't get to argue with the method, you just want the result. And so I think that's one of those sort of control mindsets that, if you can say, hey, I want you to do this thing, and this is the end product, and I don't care how you do it. If you have questions, we can talk, but just kind of that freedom to say, okay, you love to write, I'm going to give that to you. Tom, you could, record till the cows come home. I love to sound edit, and then you find those collaborations so that it's not necessarily about, power structure. I'm handing this down to you, but I'm collaborating with you to get the project done.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you very much for that. And Jeremy, let me just ask you that because, we probably started talking about 7 years ago now. Seems like a long time, but boy, my parenting skills got a lot better after having conversation with you. And I know we're, in our little niche for IO psychologists, but boy, if you want to learn something about parenting, you should really listen to the Work Cookie podcast. So, what is that relationship between your employees and your kids? Why does this information work so well for both sets?
That's interesting because in a workplace we're taught don't like in a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people have parent to child conversations with their employees, but you always want to have parent to or adult to adult conversations. Why does it work so well? I think just fundamentally when I don't know, when you look at so kids are they haven't experienced all the things that adults have to put the blinders on where they shouldn't be, to I can't think of the right words, to cloud their thinking. They're full of umph. So they've got that just initial internal motivation. And most people do too. People get up and go to work for a reason. Some people it's everyone has different reasons. But everyone has, it reminds me of the Seinfeld episode where George is trying to find a job and Jerry's like, "Do you even have a reason for waking up in the morning?" He's like, "Well, I like to get the daily news." So we're not talking we're not talking about that. But I think just in all of us, it goes back to these basic things. We want to feel good about what we're doing. We want to work on important and challenging tasks, which by the way, is a fundamental of affective slash emotional organizational commitment, which keeps people with organizations. So we want to do things that are challenging. We want to look at just all the crazy things we've created as as a human race. It's absolutely incredible. Everyone has their needs to be heard and understood, to have a second chance, to do interesting work again, and to feel good about themselves. And don't kids want that too? And some things I just don't, they just don't change. And one of the good things about this is sometimes if you need to, you can practice it in a low stakes situations, right? Like low visibility, low stakes, where if something goes wrong, it's not, oh my gosh, the sky is falling. And sometimes, especially with your more, I don't like the word, but I saw it in an article, more immature employees, that's when because you have to like, what's your level? Sometimes you have to practice these things with more like low visibility, low stakes. Those who are more skilled, et cetera, that's when you can get into your high visibility, high stakes. Tom, but I digress. I'd be interested. That would be a really good question for maybe like a clinical psychologist, someone who is really, we're work psychologists here. So it's like work psychology, sports psychology, jury psychology. And then over here, you've got a whole nother nut. You've got clinical psychology. So I wonder what they would say. But all I know is that it works, and that's it. It works, Tom.
Don't take the magic away from it. It works. Thanks, Jeremy. LindaAnn, let's go back to you.
From my perspective on that question, it's just people, it's a learning process for people regardless of age, right?
Yeah.
And often children, they're more open to learning because there's no um, uh, conditioning that you should already know something, right? And so, that's I think the challenge we have with adults is people feel bad because they might like it's a failure because they don't know something. And so helping them, just opening that door and making it easy for them to learn is a gift. So that's why I think it works. But um, and I just wanted to the previous conversation, to make sure that Lee was represented, and to make sure that if you're not delegating and teaching people to take your job, then you can't move on.
It's a really good point. Thank you. Cam, back to you.
I think I was going to say, really, if you're not continually challenging your employees and giving them opportunities for development, that's one of the main things that we see that people leave jobs. When you do a ton of exit interviews, you hear that a lot. They just hit a point in their development where they couldn't go on. The same thing, and then you guys were talking about kids. it's the same thing. I homeschooled my two boys for years, and trying to keep them at that razor edge sharp point of sufficiently challenging but not demotivatingly frustrating, um, is where you want to be with kids to learn and grow. Otherwise, if it's not challenging enough, they get lazy and they grow into lazy adults that quit every time something gets hard. Or if it's too hard, they think they're dumb and then they don't have the confidence. But yes, it does go to employee retention.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Jason. Back to you.
I know we're running quick, so I'll be really, really fast, I promise. But I'll never forget one of my very first attempts as an E6 to delegate. And I provided some directions to one of my youngins at the time, and he said, "Why?" And I looked at him and I said, "Because I said so. You want to flip for it? Just get it done." And it wasn't a task that needed to be done. And it wasn't until later on, I went to some leadership training, I'm sure, I realized if I would have stopped for a second and just clarified the reason that I wanted him specifically to do the task and how he would have ownership over it, and how it would help him develop and make it look good, right? And it, and all those other kind of individual things. But it was one of my big failures in life that still kind of plagued me to today. So anyways.
I've learned so much from my failures. They're the best teaching lessons. And when I was teaching my acting students, I'd be like, I want to see you make the biggest mistakes possible so that you're, passed out on the floor. And then I want to see you stand up and try it again, because it's a great learning experience. Thank you very much for that. Jeremy, our hour has flown by once again. Let's go back to you for some final thoughts.
Yeah, great example, Jason. I'm glad you shared that. And then Tom, so the question you had asked earlier, I want to come back to that because you had asked, like, what do you do when someone says, I'm addicted to the micromanaging, I'm not going to stop, I love it. The reason why it was so hard to put that into perspective, because that's why coaching is so important, because you can spend an hour at a time with someone and start to uncover things and ask purposeful questions, and you can get there. So that's why it's like there's no easy answer. However, plus your situation is, it's like you're talking more of, all right, I'm an employee, I work in an organization, what can I do for this person? So you don't have that time to spend to go through a coaching process. You're thinking, all right, like what can I actually do? Again, that's not easy either. But one thing, I know we're on time, is there's a lot of those mindset prompts in the delegation spreadsheet, and I was looking through those. And one might be ask like look at some of these mindsets to challenge their current assumptions, because like delegation helps my team grow. And there's of course many ways to word it, but you might say, what's your view on delegation in terms of growing other people? You might mention, uh, tell me about what leadership looks like to you in regards to delegation. So you might challenge some of their current mindsets, slide in some others, but it's going to be difficult because it's really you're arguing with something that they've already dug their heels in. And the saying is, it's easier to fool somebody than to convince them that you've fooled them. So it really takes more than just a one-off challenge kind of thing. But
Right.
one thing might be to challenge the perspective and get them to open up a little bit about, get them to stop and think, really, not just give their knee-jerk reaction.
Thank you very much for that. We are nearing the end of August. IO Psychology Awareness Month is coming to an end. Maybe September will be Hired IO Psychologist Month. Where are we going in September?
I'm writing that down, Tom. That's not a bad idea. September, Heather Morton will be leading September, and then October, Emmy Baresi will be leading those. We don't have the topics yet, but I'm sure they will be super terrific and fantastic.
And is there any new CBOC news, things that might be coming down the pipe that you'd like to divulge at this point?
We did. So for Eye Awareness Month, we got the 30% off the career course. That ends here, I think, on Monday after August is over. And I put a poll out because we're always looking as a membership organization, how can we augment, build, make our membership even more impactful? So we've got some good responses. I put a poll up on LinkedIn, or not a poll, I put a question up on LinkedIn, about like in a perfect world, what would an IO organization look like for you? What types of benefits? How would it help you grow, et cetera, et cetera. So if you haven't seen that or made some suggestions, please go ahead and do so. But yeah, there's some really good suggestions rather than us internally racking our brain meeting after meeting. What do people want? What do people want? Well, let's find out what people want. So we're taking some more purposeful steps, and we know that something will come out of it.
Well, let me ask you this too, and I'll try to make this quick, but I'm hearing a lot of buzz out there about how the work world is going to change with AI. And that, a lot of people who are working in offices, it's not just the factory workers anymore who are going to be replaced by robots. But your administrative assistant may not be a real person, in 5 years. So maybe we should have a futurist come on and tell us what the future world of work is going to be like, and where does IO psychology fit into that? How do you IO psychology a robot?
That's not a bad idea. For some reason, I wouldn't be surprised if that's already what Emmy is thinking. For some reason, it's just in but duly noted, because you're right. It is 5 years from now is going to look a lot different from today. So that's good forward thinking. Two good suggestions, Mr. Tom. Thank you.
There you go. It's a good Thursday.
It is.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Jeremy. Thank you, everyone who participated today. And if you're enjoying the Work Cookie podcast, please share that information with your friends. As we say, parenting skills come to Work Cookie for those as well. Thanks, Jeremy. And if everything is good, let's do a count out, and we'll see everyone back here in September.
Thank you, everyone. Counting out in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.